Can I first of all start by welcoming you all to the ECR Global Poverty Summit, Local Non-State Solutions to Poverty. I'd like to thank all my colleagues from the European Conservative Reformist Group who have worked so hard in putting this together. It really is my honour to welcome you here today. I hope that today will provide the opportunity to bring together individuals and organisations from around the world to discuss and debate the varied and fascinating stories and their perspectives on their perspectives on tackling poverty in their local communities, to exchange best practice and best policies. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is put pen to paper, or in these days, fingers to the iPad, and compile a list of concrete proposals to offer a credible and effective and sustainable set of recommendations to help people who want to fight poverty or deprivation or social problems in their local community. And we all of us in this room and the organisations that you will hear from have taken part in this battle or the war on poverty for different reasons. Today you will hear from people whose experiences of poverty have been deeply personal and life-changing, and with a real commitment to contribute positively to their community. You'll hear from some people who've set up their own project, or from those who work for organisations and businesses that have contributed to finding solutions to local problems. So to all of you who have travelled from not only my constituency of London, but from across the EU, from across the UK, across the European Union and from across the world, I want to thank you all for taking the time to come and share your experiences with us today. What we will hear today, and I'm sure what many of you will realise, is that tackling poverty is not a simple issue. It is not, there is no one silver bullet to solving the problem. It's a multifaceted, complex challenge. That doesn't mean that should be an excuse for not trying. What it means is that we have to understand the different ways. And we all know the debates that are out there. My friends on the left will broadly tell me that actually the solution is very easy, that government has failed, and that what you need to do is tax people more, redistribute that wealth, and have more public servants to do that. But there are still concerns, despite all the money spent in some areas by governments and local, national, even from the EU, where there's been money spent, but you still see areas of deprivation. Now, my libertarian friends on the right, and I'm someone who I'd probably describe as a classical liberal, libertarian-minded conservative, but many of my friends on the right will argue that poverty is best tackled through rolling back the state, cutting taxes and allowing the additional wealth generated to trickle down to the poor. But we know that gaps in private welfare was one of the reasons that the welfare state came into being in the first place. And we also forget that not everyone in their local communities are the self-motivated, rational economic agents that you read about in textbooks. Similarly, there will be those who say, well, actually, what you need is large NGOs. And we see the large NGOs that run campaigns and either ask governments to spend more money or they ask for donations. Yet we also know that there are many people I speak to who say they would like to give, but they are concerned about what they see as generous salaries, or they see as NGOs spending money on campaigning rather than tackling problems in many countries. I've been to many countries where NGOs operate, and I've heard criticisms from some of the people who are supposed to be the recipients. But that's not to say that we should say, just because there are criticisms of the state or criticisms of the NGOs, that we should negate or neglect the good work they do. We have to remember that for some people there is no other option. The state might be all they have. The work of the local NGO might be all that they have. I just want to turn to another perspective, and this is the real reason for this conference today, because one of the most inspiring parts for me as my job as a member of the European Parliament for London is when I go across London and I meet with, sometimes I work with, sometimes I read about, the thousands and many local community projects that are tackling poverty or exclusion in their local neighbourhoods, often driven by local community champions or someone who's seen a problem and they say, I'm not going to wait for someone else to tackle this. I'm not going to wait for the government, or I'm not going to wait for a large NGO or anyone else to do this. I'm going to do something about this myself. I'm going to get off, I'm going to get off out here rather than complain about it. I'm going to do something about it. And I must admit, I find it disappointing that when politicians talk about poverty, when commentators talk about poverty, they only focus on what the state can or cannot do, or what large NGOs can or cannot do. And they don't pay enough attention, in my mind, to the work in these local communities, what local community projects, quite often without government help or without any large budget, can do and actually are doing to tackle poverty and deprivation. Now, you will hear from some of these projects today, not only from my home city of London, but from across the UK, from across Europe, and from across the globe. Projects which help, for example, former drug dealers become sandwich entrepreneurs, as Andy Smith of Regenerate and the Feel Good Bakery says to me, turning dope dealers into hope dealers. Projects which distribute food prepared by refugees so they can have an income, as we will hear from Nuran Salah from Cairo. Projects which give small grants to local, initiatives in Africa, as John Humphreys of the Kitchen Table Charities Trust does. Projects providing individuals with microloans to help them start their own businesses, or to help them from being a domestic kitchen to a kitchen that feeds more people locally, which are now fully fledged businesses. Simple ideas that are fueled by ideas, skills and hope. And I think this is what inspires people. This is what creates futures for people. It's not, and in no way is it really a handout. Now, I'm not claiming, and please do not misrepresent this, I'm not claiming that local community-led non-state projects provide the one and only magic solution for ending poverty. It would be naive of me to say that. But I hope that we can discuss today how we can champion and promote the role of these charities and these local projects in the wider debate. I think the neglected champions, the neglected heroes of tackling poverty. As the leader of the European Conservatives and Reformists Group, one of the largest political groups in the European Parliament, with MEPs from 18 countries, I hope that by bringing us all together, not just from across the EU, but also from across the world, we can all discuss the challenges we face in our local communities and what more we can do to find solutions. I hope that this summit will allow us to talk to each other and share ideas at an international level. Some of the other speakers you'll hear from are foundations, institutes, church initiatives, refugee projects and individuals with a great idea. And the variety of action initiatives and these kinds of discussion, I hope, are key to good policy making. And I hope that today's panel discussions are thought-provoking, challenging, but most of all reassuring that there are great people out there working hard to tackle the most fundamental problems in society. My concluding remark would perhaps be that when it comes to tackling poverty, there has been an abundance of money and aid, but maybe in some areas a deficit of ideas and creativity. Perhaps it's time to finally acknowledge that a top-down approach can be more than matched by grassroots neighbourhood solutions devised and administered from the hearts of these communities. I don't believe we need more tax, more public servants, more state, but neither do I believe that simply cutting tax and less state on its own will solve poverty. I hope we can all ask to what extent initiatives can be and should be locally inspired and administered rather than top-down state or trickle-down wealth creation. And this is why I wanted to hold this global summit and why I wanted to gather this group of talented, interesting and respected individuals today to talk about their experiences and recommendations. Now, whether we are political animals and label these community-led projects cooperative socialism or community conservatism or localist libertarianism, or you are non-politicians and you talk about community activism or citizenship or people first, what I'm saying to you is that we don't all have to agree. I'm not asking everyone to have exactly the same ideas. I think we should all be challenged, especially if we come from different perspectives. What might work in our community may not work in another community, even in the same town. What might work in Greece, for example, may not necessarily work in North London. What might work in Egypt might not necessarily work elsewhere. But actually, what could work in Egypt and could work in London? Let's look at some of these ideas, and also let's be prepared to disagree and debate. There was one speaker I invited who had written a book about microfinance and wrote about the good bits about microfinance, but also what he considered the dark side of microfinance. And when I invited him, he refused to come. He, in fact, got quite angry in his email, and he said to me, you just want to use me for your own ideological view. And I said, no, I don't want that. You know, I want to hear your perspective. I want to be challenged. I want you all to be challenged. You know, I'm not saying that this is the only solution to tackling poverty. If you disagree with me, come along and challenge me. It was sad that he didn't take up that challenge, but I hope that we will have these discussions. It's time to champion and recognise the huge contribution made by those tackling problems in their neighbourhoods and communities, who often don't get the recognition they deserve, but who definitely make a huge impact on the lives of people around them. Can I thank you and welcome you, and I hope you find today's discussions valuable.